Welcome to Rewilding Love. This season is with a couple on the brink of divorce.
This is episode number 1, introducing our brave couple, Alicia and Mateo, part 1.
I may have just made the biggest mistake of my life.
I didn't get married to have uncertainties.
I always felt like we were really passionate and affectionate and loved each other beyond belief. We said I love you literally our first date.
I love the girl. I know that there's episodes and moments that I'm not in love with.
The innate harmony, love, well-being is actually already there.
Hunky-dory, I can't believe I just said that. I think
We're engaged. I'm gonna get the girl that I want all the time.
You are listening to Rewilding Love with me, Angus Ross.
And me, Rohini Ross.
Rewilding Love is a podcast about relationships.
We believe that love never disappears completely in relationships. It can always be rewilded. Listen in as we guide a real couple back to their natural state of love.
Relax and enjoy the show.
So this is our first episode of our first podcast. And I came up with this idea a little while back, and I thought it would be really interesting to be able to do a recorded intensive with a couple. Angus and I do relationship intensives with couples, and we really wanted to be able to share it with a wider group of people, and we thought recording an intensive would be a great way to have something to share with people that would be able to help a large number of people through listening in and hearing how the sessions unfold. So we recorded an intensive plus the follow-up sessions with the couple. And I remember when I first brought up the idea with you, Angus, that you were a little bit skeptical for a couple of reasons. Do you remember?
Yeah, I thought it was a crazy idea. I thought that I'm going to have to learn how to use all this technology, which seemed a little bit of a stretch to me. And then the other component to all this that I was concerned about was how on earth would we find a couple who'd be willing to really be vulnerable in that way. And obviously for the podcast to have really any kind of value, there need to be a couple that are having a significant challenge, and somehow we're going to lead them on this journey back to a healthy relationship. So I don't know, I just felt like it was unlikely we were going to find a couple that were going to be willing to put themselves out there in that way.
So were you surprised?
I was really surprised, if not... I was pleasantly surprised and also quite shocked at how open and vulnerable the people that we ended up working with really were able to be.
Yeah, we are really grateful for their participation. And we have changed their names, so the names that we're using here aren't their actual names. So there is some level of anonymity for them. And you managed to figure out the technology pretty well.
Yeah, in fact, in a sense, it was actually probably thinking back, the technology actually got the ball rolling, because we started to have this conversation seriously around the time of Black Friday. So if we were going to buy it or make that investment, it had to be done really, in my mind, on the spur of the moment, because there were all these wonderful bargains. So it's like, let's pull the trigger on this, because otherwise, we're probably not going to have to this is not going to come around for another year. Black Friday being what it is, we got some incredible bargains and bought all the technology. And actually, it wasn't as if we needed to have, the services of some professional studio. It's pretty simple, but there are some things that, there are some bells and whistles that you need.
But you do love a bargain.
I do love a bargain.
So we're going to be sharing clips from our sessions with our couple, Alicia and Mateo. But before we start there, we're just going to give you a little bit of background information.
Right. Well, background information. So Alicia and Mateo are a couple in their 30s. They've been together for 7 years and have been married a year. They were referred to us by Alicia's therapist, who I believe thought that you and I would be a good fit to work with them on this issue, because that's what we do. And 2 months earlier, Mateo had served up divorce papers which obviously Alicia was, to say the very least, devastated by. And so ultimately that made the whole project and the possibility of the whole project very juicy for us, because if we could get the turnaround that we were looking for, that would be, I feel, quite a dramatic thing to share in a podcast.
And I do want to hasten to add that I don't really think we went in with a strong agenda that we had to turn it around. Would you say? Like, we are not attached to outcomes with couples. We really trust that they're going to come to a place of equanimity within themselves and then make the decisions from there.
Yeah, I mean, I was just, trying to employ creative license for dramatic effect.
Or maybe you do go in with an agenda.
No, I mean, ultimately, yes, we'll probably have a much more effective product if things can turn around. So that would be nice. I can't say absolutely, categorically, I can say that, yeah, we're not going with an agenda when we work with a couple. All we can do is point them in the right direction, and hopefully wisdom will prevail and better decisions will be made. But yeah, I don't think it ever pays dividends to think that, we can go in and fix this problem, and that's the end result that we're looking for. But yeah, I mean, in this sense, we'll have a product at the end of it that will be much better and much more interesting if we get the turnaround that we are anticipating, let us say.
I know, but what if we don't?
Well,
people are listening now and they don't know.
Or watch this space and see what happens.
So even though Mateo had served the divorce papers to Alicia, he was ambivalent. He wasn't completely committed to the divorce. And throughout that 2-month period, they stayed living together, although he did withhold romantic and sexual gestures because he didn't want to lead her on or give the wrong message, or give her a sense of hope that he wasn't actually feeling. But I do want to say that even though he made that very bold and strong statement, there was still some wiggle room for him. And for Alicia, because he had done that, she really felt like she was walking on eggshells the whole time, because she was very committed to the marriage, and she felt like any wrong move that she made would result in him saying, yeah, that's it, I'm following through on this.
Yeah, I mean, I get the sense, as far as Mateo is concerned, that this is something that he thought, this was kind of like an ace up his sleeve, a card he can play that will hopefully change things around to his way of seeing things, or to his liking at least. And obviously, I guess that backfired. And I'm talking about serving up the divorce papers. So I think it got to the point where Alicia started talking about this with her therapist, that when they came to this conclusion that they would try working with us, in his mind, I think it was a last resort, kind of like the last chance salon, as it were.
I actually think it's the last chance saloon.
Well, I beg to differ. I think it's salon.
I think it's saloon.
Salon. It doesn't sound right. Saloon.
Well,
it's the last chance saloon.
We'll have to look it up.
All right. Okay, well, I will reserve judgment until you get the facts straight on that one. Anyway, moving swiftly on, we thought that we would share this journey with Alicia and Mateo that would hopefully end up being something. Ultimately, they might be able to resolve their differences and find their way back to what we would hope would be their natural rewilded state. We are looking in the direction to hopefully facilitate the process of rewilding this relationship back into its loving natural state. And that's ultimately, what we want to do. And hopefully the byproduct of that is that they will find that place and will walk off into the sunset, and everyone will be happy, even the listeners of this podcast. But we will see. But yeah, we're not attached to outcomes.
And when we say how love can be rewild in relationships, we're using the metaphor of rewilding that is oftentimes used to refer to nature, where you introduce a keystone species like the wolves in Yellowstone Park, where they had been absent for years, and then you reintroduce them, and the whole environment of the relationship, the whole environment changes as a result of the wolves being introduced. So for us, we're using that rewilding metaphor to demonstrate how even when it feels like love is lost and can't come back, that it can actually be reintroduced and rewilded.
Yes, I think it may be worthwhile to actually elaborate on this rewilding metaphor a little bit further, because what actually happened and why we were inspired by this particular experiment that took place in Yellowstone Park was that what happened when a pack of wolves were reintroduced into the park vicinity, the deer that were once rampant and were really decimating all the foliage and really having a dramatic effect on the whole environment, when the wolves were reintroduced and the deer were naturally culled and far less inclined to hang out in the open, what happened is a whole bunch of other creatures and other, flora and fauna came back into prominence because they were not impacted by the deer. So what was so amazing about this whole experiment is it actually changed the course of the river. But I don't want to go too deep into the ins and outs of it, but what I would say was that, or what I will say, as the case may be, is that the wolves, what they ended up doing was restoring the park back into its pristine state. So ultimately, the park found its way back into a position of balance and harmony. And that's why we love the idea of using this as a metaphor, because that's kind of where we're really trying to help our couples get to in terms of their relationship. We're trying to help them restore the relationship back into its pristine state, a state of natural balance and natural harmony.
And I think it's really important to note what you're saying is so key, because it's a restoration process, which means that the innate harmony, love, well-being is actually already there, and that we can support them with bringing that back to life. And I love that story about the wolves in Yellowstone Park, and so we can include a link to the video by George Monbiot that explains in more detail what happened there. Okay, well, let's start hearing from Alicia and Mateo now. First off, we're going to hear from Alicia, and she's going to share about how she and Mateo met.
So we met when we were 18 at Auburn University.
Yeah.
We lived in the same dorm, but we weren't really friends. We were friends with a mutual friend of ours.
Right.
After the first semester, after finals, we remembered this once we started dating. We ended up sitting next to each other on the shuttle that takes us from the school to the Atlanta airport, which is about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive. And we had this whole conversation, and we were enjoying each other for sure. And then we got to the security line, and there was somebody behind us that played tennis for Auburn that literally kept telling us that we were dating, and we're like, no, we're not. We're really not. And then he walked me to my gate. We gave each other a hug and kiss goodbye, and that was it. And then didn't really ever see him really after that. I mean, we lived in the same dorm, so I'd see him, but never really an interaction. And then fast forward about 4 years later, I would say, he came to Miami to visit that mutual friend of ours. And I'm born and raised in Miami. So I'd gone over to the house where he was visiting for spring break, and I had gone to hang out. And when I first saw him, I was just like, whoa. He had gotten taller and, just became a little bit more of a man. And I always thought he was really cute at Auburn. But yeah, so anyway, I was just like, whoa. I was like, hello. And that week we ended up boyfriend and girlfriend, and now we're here.
And so that was the long distance part. So you were in Miami and he was in California?
Yeah, for about a year and some, because he had to finish school. I was already done.
Right.
And so I had started, I actually hadn't started working yet because I was going to go to law school. So I was studying for the LSATs while writing. I was ghost writing a book of a family friend of ours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was involved with the cocaine cowboys and the kingpins.
Oh, wow.
And so I was writing his story, which was really fascinating. So I was doing that at the time.
I'd say that's quite a romantic story for how they got together along the way.
Yeah, so far so good. Not anything terribly wrong with that picture as far as I can see.
Is there anything wrong with that picture?
No, that's what I just said.
You said there's not much terribly wrong.
Oh, no, there's nothing wrong.
And Alicia did shift gears, and she decided not to pursue law school, and so she's going to share a little bit more about that here.
And so I kind of just like reevaluated what I was going to do and started working in Miami while he was in school, and then came out to California over Christmas and New Year's before we hit like a year. Yeah, so I came out for Christmas and stuff, and I don't know. I always felt like we were really passionate and affectionate and loved each other beyond belief. I mean, we said "I love you" literally our first date.
Yeah.
So he had asked me if I would ever move out, and I was just like, yeah. And at this point, I'm like, what, 23? So I really don't know anything that I'm doing, but I took a leap of faith.
Yeah. And so you moved out, and did you live together
May.
at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was in May.
Yes. So after Christmas happened, in May he graduated, and then I came out in August.
Got it.
Yeah, and we immediately, I mean, that's what he wanted. He wanted us to move in together and start our lives together. And I had said first, I was like, well, I can get my own place, and we can figure this out. We don't have to rush anything. He was like, nope, that's what I want. I want us to live together. I want us to be together. I want us to go through the struggle. What he said was, go through the struggles of life together and figure things out. Okay. And I was like, okay.
So I would say it sounds like things are still going really well on this journey together.
Yes, hunky-dory.
And now we'll hear that, they did have some financial difficulties when Alicia moved out to California to be with Mateo. So she'll share a little bit about that here.
Hunky-dory, I can't believe I just said that. I think, isn't that a David Bowie song? I don't even know where that comes from.
We're going to have to look up that term, too.
I guess we will, yes. We can have some footnotes at the end of this podcast.
Yeah, they're called show notes.
Show notes.
All right, back to Alicia.
So when we first started out, he ended up losing his job, and I was a temp because I really didn't have any experience out here.
Right.
And I just worked really hard, and so for the first 3 years of me living out here, every expense was on me. I took care of the household. We didn't have like a dining room table for 9 months in our first apartment. We ate on our coffee table, and we didn't have a couch for the first month.
Right.
All the things that my parents didn't want me to experience. But I was happy to do it because I was happy to be with him.
Yeah.
And trust me, we lived in a shithole that was gross. Now, as he got on his feet about 3 years ago, it started out slow. He wasn't 50-50. It was more like 80-20 in a sense. Just so that he can feel comfortable on his feet. And I think a little bit of that definitely put detriment on our relationship because I definitely used it against him when I would get angry. And he would use it against himself and me.
So based on what Alicia is sharing now, we can really hear where some of the stress and tension is starting to show up for her in the relationship.
Yes, possibly a few little cracks in the masonry.
I just feel like I'm so underappreciated.
Yeah, I hear that.
Like, I go grocery shopping. He gets mad at me if I leave for a work trip and I haven't gone and filled up the groceries, like all the groceries, because then he'll call me and be like, well, you've abandoned me. And, oh, I eat just chocolate. And I was like, I didn't have a chance to go, but you're an adult. Like, you can go.
Right.
Like, I remember I was on the plane, this is a year ago, and our dog ran out of food. And he, and I have Wi-Fi on the plane, so I was able to text. And he, held that against me, and I was like, you're on the ground. Like, you can drive 10 minutes to go to PetSmart and buy food. But no, I had to Amazon Prime Now it to him because, God forbid, he had to do something. It's like, I take care of everything. And I don't mind taking care of everything. I love doing that, and I feel like that's what I was supposed to do as a wife. And I enjoy it. Even my friends say, God, you make me think that I have to be a better wife to my husband. Like, you do everything. And it's like, I gladly and passionately do that. But it's like, I never get a thank you. Whereas he'll unload the dishwasher, take out the trash, once in a blue moon, and then, thank you so much.
Feeling unappreciated is definitely one of the key issues that Alicia brings up as one of her concerns about the relationship. And I would say that that's a very common theme that often comes up in the couples that we work with, where one or both parties feel that the other person isn't demonstrating appreciation in a way that they want or that they can actually receive it. And so that was something that was definitely on her mind as she came into this intensive.
Yeah, and I guess another way of saying that is that people can feel disrespected, unappreciated, disrespected, really kind of amount to the same thing.
What do you mean that, what did you say, respect?
Disrespect.
Disrespect.
Yes, disrespect and feeling unappreciated. I feel like they're significant bedfellows. I feel like being unappreciated has this standard or expectation to be treated in a way that is respectful based on my standards and expectations.
Okay, I guess I never would have sort of lumped them together the way that you just did, but I can see how they're related, and I can see how they both are a reflection of the individual's expectations not being met. And the other thing that Alicia is really having a hard time with is the uncertainty in the relationship. The threat of divorce has been very painful and difficult for her to navigate, not knowing what's happening. And that's something that's really been on her mind as well.
The constant uncertainty and the constant, I guess not so much accusatory, but like little things that are said to me that are like throw me out of like it's a trigger that throw me out of spiral, are things like saying uncertainty. And I'm like, I didn't get married to like have uncertainties.
Right.
Like it's not meant to be, it's not this competition. Right. And I feel like he's kind of made it a competition with me in several aspects, to the point that now I've said stuff like, you're not going to win this one, or like, it's being pushed to that regard. Right. And so I'm having those explosions because I'm like, I'm literally overthinking every last thing, and it's driving me mad. And then I feel like I'm walking on eggshells because of that. So like, I feel like I'm a prisoner.
Here, not only are the cracks showing up, but you can also recognize that Alicia does have some recognition of her volatility in the relationship. But based on how she sees the circumstances that she's in, she feels quite justified that that's a reaction that would be normal to have in these circumstances, given the duress that she feels she's under. And we'll hear more about this along the way, but this next tiny clip just also shows how she sees her volatility not just as a negative, angry outburst, but she really embraces her passionate nature. And so she kind of sees it as all wrapped together and not really a bad thing.
At least that I know, if he fell in love with me for who I am, because I was this crazy, loud, passionate person.
Well, I think that gives us some great background information from Alicia. What do you think? Should we listen to Mateo now?
Yeah, let's see what Mateo has to say.
There was volatility from day one.
From day one.
And the initial volatility that took place was her family. I remember the first day that like her and I reconnected. We were in Miami. She came over to my buddy's house, and we're there sitting down, laughing, smiling, and the first phone call she picked up was her dad, and he was just screaming, and she was just pretending like everything was, cheery and whatever, and she's like, yeah, not knowing that everyone could hear him yelling on the phone at the table to right? It's the moment where the speaker is a lot louder than what the person thinks, and they're just pretending like, yeah, sure, yeah, Dad, I'll be home soon, right? And he's just yelling.
Why is he yelling?
God knows why. I don't know. I don't know why. I think it was just wanted her home for some reason, although it was probably not even like 6 p.m., whatever. But so then so I went back. That happened on a spring break, and I remember leaving and being like, hey, I want this to work out, and I want to commit to you, and so we did the long distance until the rest of the year. Then I came for the summer, and I mean, the summer was one big ball of emotions. I mean, there was issues with my buddy who I was staying with that I'm not going to put 100% blame on her, but kind of cultivated that issue. And there was also an issue with her and her family to the point where she moved out in the middle of the summer. There was always a lot of turbulence, and that was just the first, I don't even know, like 8 months maybe, right?
Okay.
And then I left for the summer. So upon all that, her, anger with the family, going through whatever it may have been, there was also, me always, I mean, she can tell you, her family can tell you, I've always been pushing her towards family, because I didn't grow up with much family here. All my family is in Argentina. So we got in a lot of fights because of that, because, I would always try to present a different perspective into what was going on, and that's when the first time I ever heard, "You're never on my side, you don't, you think I'm lying," right? That. So then we left. That occurred many times throughout that summer. There was a lot of good times too. So then I go back for school, and we're living a long distance relationship. At that point, she had moved in with her grandparents, and again, every day that we're talking on the phone, there's either drama about, her, not directly her grandparents, because that was in the beginning. She was like, "Oh, my grandparents are so bad," but then I kind of pushed her again towards family, so she ended up moving in with her grandparents, and then, there's a whole issue with her parents and their siblings, that the fact that she went to go live with the grandparents, I don't know their family dynamic, but it's rocky. And so there was always that, but there was always more than that, because it was always me just trying to present a different point of view of how one can handle, the situation that they're in and still be okay.
So I know this was intake, and this is the early part of the whole experience, but it's easy to see for me how all of the story that I'm hearing from Mateo now is kind of, I get a sense, looking through the lens of a very low mood. So although at one point, almost as a very brief aside, he says that there were good times too, he's very much focusing on everything that he feels is wrong or was wrong with the relationship at that particular time. And, I can only imagine that, they didn't get together based on all their differences. They got together because there was a fundamental experience of love that they were engaged in. So it's interesting just to hear this whole laundry list of woes about how the relationship looked, from what he's saying, it appears doomed from the start.
Yeah, it's a very different telling of the backstory from his perspective and her perspective. And you're right. I think probably 99% of what he's saying is focused on the volatility, the conflict. And there's like 1% where he said, yeah, we had some good times.
I know.
And also, I think what comes forward in this piece is where he sees himself as having the voice of reason. She's going through all of these troubles, this conflict, these difficulties, and he's the one that's helping her to stay on track. That's part of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, very much so. But he has, as it seems blatantly obvious to me, that he's got into this habitual low mood about what the relationship looks like, and those are the optics through which he's seeing it.
Yeah, well, let's hear a bit more from him, shall we?
I'm moving on from all this stuff, right? So
Right, yeah, no, absolutely.
So I'm really trying. I love the girl. I know that there's episodes and moments that I'm not in love with, but I'm thinking, okay, well, there's an issue with her family. Once we cross that border, right, that won't exist any longer. And then it came to the long distance relationship, where again, a lot of our communication was what I like to call bitching, and just complaining. And it was that. So I still saw the person that I loved, and just realized that this is a piece that I have to, take on until she figures some shit out, right? And then it just we had the long distance relationship. Then she ended up moving over once I graduated from school. Then the issue became, I don't have any friends here. You're settled here, which is legitimate. Right?
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have any friends,
Mm-hmm.
which is true. So, I mean, that justified her actions, in between those moments where it was full on blowouts, whatever it may be. You're spending too much time with your friends, not me. And saying horrendous things about my friends at the moment, which I've later come to terms with earlier this year, or later last year rather, since we're in the new year. So there was those blow-ups, but I justified it with, hey, she just moved out here,
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't have any friends, she's not comfortable, blah, blah, blah. Well, she got comfortable, she has friends, she has more friends than I do. All my friends moved away. I literally come home and it's me, her, and I have one other friend that lives in town, everyone else gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've got no one. So I don't hold that against, I'm not acting out or lashing out because I only have one friend available. I'm not doing that. So then, now the excuse for all the outburst was, well, who am I, this girl who moved out from Florida for her boyfriend and, without a ring on her finger, right? So then the pressure for the marriage started coming, and she leaned on that excuse heavily for the way, she was speaking to me. I'm not saying that I was a saint in the relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot that was justified on her end because we weren't engaged. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then, right, there's obviously situations in between, but then we get engaged. Okay, perfect. I'm thinking, okay, we're engaged. Like, I'm going to get the girl that I want all the time.
I mean, I really don't trust the narrative because it seems like it feels like he must have spent a long time in probably, as I've said before, in this sort of perpetual low mood. And in that state, he's just allowed himself to marinate in this very dark and negative looking narrative that is painting this very bleak and dim picture of their relationship. But then it's juxtaposed with this odd little snippet where he'll say, yeah, and I really love the girl, I really want this to work, or words to that effect. So I just mistrust just the level of how elaborate the narrative is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I love that line that he said at the very beginning. I love the girl, but I don't like the episodes, however he said it. And I think that he really is demonstrating, in his way, that he does love Alicia and he does want to be with her, but he finds the blowouts really problematic. That's what I'm hearing and what he's saying. He finds them very difficult. And from what he's sharing, he did all of these things that he thought were the right things to do to prevent the blowouts. Like, he thought if he gave her what she was asking for, then that would stop. And right at the very end, those famous last words like, great, now I'm going to get the girl that I've always, wanted, the girl of my dreams. And it's just not a very realistic perspective. And I think one of the lessons for all couples, ourselves included, Angus, is to realize that we're not responsible for the other person's behavior. It's not on us to change them or fix them. And it's not going to be through our doing that we can make them different.
Yeah, there's quite a heavy victim mindset as far as Mateo is concerned, which I notice. I don't know, what you think about that.
Well, I know what you mean, but when you say it that way, it feels like you're being a little bit hard on him.
Well, maybe so. I noticed that with it. As far as I'm concerned, I can see when I get into a victim mindset, it just feels a little bit. It just feels a little bit amplified to me at this point.
Yeah, and he's definitely feeling victimized by her. I would agree.
Then again, it was issues with my friends or family for some reason, and it's not just my friends or family. I mean, she'll tell you or she won't tell you, but she's lost her 2 best friends over the course of 2 years due to her, the way that she spoke to them, right? But I'm not going to get into that because that's not my story to tell. But what afterwards we had gotten engaged, and now, you know, the story changed where it's like, oh, I'm just a stupid girl who got engaged to this guy that can leave her at any moment. Okay, well, God, like I just got engaged because I didn't want to go through all this stuff. An engagement to me is a promise to marry. Like, we're getting married, right? We're telling our families everything. But she took it as, oh, this is just another way for you to postpone like the inevitable. I'm just like, oh my God, like what's going on here, right? So then, obviously there was blowouts there, and things were said that, you know, one can't just easily forget, you know, and so, you know, at that moment, I really didn't even want to get married, really. We're engaged, and I'm like, dude, this is never going to end. And then it became like this guilt trip, and, oh, you know, it's because we're not married, blah, blah, blah. It became this guilt trip where I was like, God, I really just have to figure out if I'm ever going to get this girl of my dreams that I know that she can be and she has glimpses of. You know, so I got to follow this through. I wasn't going to pull the plug, even though, like, deep down inside, I was like, dude, this is a fucking lost cause. I said that. Sorry for cursing.
No, don't worry.
So we got married, and the thing just never ended. It was just always this turbulent relationship, and it was one thing or another, whether now it was pressure having babies or, I mean, you just name it. You know, and that's what I'm thinking, like, I may have just made the biggest mistake of my life. Like, I just married this girl, I led her, my family, her family on, our friends, everyone.
I mean, I listened to that, and I just don't know if I really trust the sentiment, because, you know, maybe he thinks all of the above, and that he may have made the biggest mistake of his life, but I guess time will tell. I just feel like, you know, as I've said before, and I don't want to sound like a scratch record, this just seems like a very low mood talking, and if that's the case, yeah, we've got plenty of opportunity to see where this can go in a more positive vein. But, you know, maybe who knows? If I'm going to take it at face value, all that he's saying looks like the relationship is doomed. But I don't know. I just don't trust it.
Well, with the way that he's describing things, it really is clear that from his perspective, Alicia is the one with the problem, and he's the reasonable one, just trying to navigate being with this irrational woman. And if she could only see how reasonable he is, then things would be fine, and there wouldn't be any of this conflict or volatility or blow-ups. And again, as you're saying, you're skeptical of the narrative that he's giving. I think that it's clearly real and true for him, and it's not the full picture.
Yeah, not the full picture, and we'll see where this leads. And I'm very curious about it at this point.
Thank you so much for listening to Rewilding Love. If you enjoyed this podcast, please let us know by subscribing on iTunes, and we would love for you to leave a review there.
iTunes reviews will steer people to this podcast who need help with their relationships.
If you would like to learn more about our work and our online rewilding community, please visit our website, therewilders.org.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week.